Welcome back. Now, if you ask New Yorkers to evaluate Michael Bloomberg's tenure as mayor of New York City, you're likely to get some pretty polarized and impassioned responses. Some say, hey, the guy's a visionary. He forever changed the landscape of New York. He's a man who ushered in an era of prosperity, peace here, and also took on some issues that others wouldn't have tried. But others say that progress, it's come at an expense of the poor, and it is a man who's presided over stop and frisk. So what is his legacy and what lies ahead for a man of huge ambitions? Michael Scherer of Time magazine took a closer look at the Bloomberg years. We spoke about what he found last week. When he looks back on his term, do you think privately, if he had it over again, he still would have run for that third term?
Yes, I think he has very few regrets, and I think he's having a great time. And I think he's also very comfortable leaving office right now. So I don't think he has any regrets for doing that, even though he obviously did stretch a little to get it done. But he, I think, is very happy with what he's been able to accomplish in New York. He thinks history will ultimately judge him very favorably, even if his approval ratings in New York are not very good. And I think he sees whatever he does next as a continuation of the same project. I mean, he used the mayor's office in New York, obviously to run the city of New York and to demonstrate his own abilities, but to pursue a lot of the issues that he's very interested in. And once he leaves the mayor's office, he fully intends to continue pursuing those efforts.
If there was one perception that rankles him most about his time in office, is he most upset about the really the public rebuke, if you look at the polls, over stop and frisk, or is it that he presided over a city that is, the person who hopes to succeed him, Mr. Blasio says, is basically two cities, ones of have and have-nots and a growing divide in terms of that income disparity? What bothers him most about those perceptions?
Well, he just basically rejects them all. And one of the things about him is that he's incredibly cutting when you bring up his critics and criticism against him. He just totally dismisses it outright, basically as unrational. Now, I think he would argue, and we didn't get into this in the interview, but I've talked to people around him, that growing income inequality is not an issue. It's a real problem. But he's also argued that in the city of New York, the ability, or making the city attractive to very high wealth people, making it an attractive place to stay for Wall Street and banks and things like that, really does underwrite all the city is able to do for people without money.
Is there a concern, though, that some of what he's done, especially stop and frisk and standing behind it along with Commissioner Kelly, will go away after he leaves? And some of the programs that he's been branded on, the social nannyism, et cetera, those also go away, and that impacts his legacy.
I do think he believes that if you got rid of something like stop and frisk, you will see an increase in crime, and that will vindicate his position. I mean, his theory here is that the reason for stop and frisk is that it's a data-driven program that is successful, even if obviously it leads to things that look a whole lot like racial profiling, even if the courts haven't clearly labeled them that. I think with the other programs, a lot of them are here to stay. There's not much risk of them going away. I mean, he really has won the city smoking war nationwide. I think the trends on restaurant labeling and other stuff like that are moving in the same direction. There's some questions about the soda size, but he's now going to be able to take that fight overseas to other cities, to take the fight to other states in this country.
Michael, I'm very curious about what you believe he plans to do after office in terms of guns.
No, he's made it very clear, and his aides have made it very clear that he's just getting started. His theory of this case is that this isn't a one-off, that the only way you really change the gun debate in the U.S. is over a 10 or 20-year horizon by creating a political penalty, much in the way the NRA has for people who vote for gun control, for people who vote against gun control, and that's what he intends to do.
Is there a political job, finally, Michael, other than president, that would interest him?
I'm sure there is. I asked him. I mean, he's saying he's not interested in president now. I don't think anybody's arguing that he could actually get elected to president now, but he has also not made clear what he's doing next, and I think he will have another job. He says he's not going to go back to managing his company on a day-to-day basis. He's done that. He's happy with the management team that's now there. But he also says that he believes his talent is managing large, complex organizations. And so I think he's going to leave office. He said he's going to go on vacation for a little bit. He feels no pressure to decide right away what he's going to do next. But I think if a job opportunity presented itself to run another large, complex organization that works on the policy issues he's interested in and gave him some manner of freedom to do that, he'd be very eager to do it. So yes, I do think there's a real possibility that either an international organization or even a cabinet level position or something like that could come along in the next 5 years or so that he would get very excited about, or even another corporate opportunity, and he would pursue it.
Well, he's got 31 billion reasons here to be selective. Michael, great job. I really appreciate a few minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Richard.
Evan, will the history books judge Mayor Bloomberg kindly?
Absolutely. A lot of big ideas coming out of the first term. The audacity of bidding on the Olympics, and while they didn't build the stadium, transforming the west side of Manhattan, building new subway stations, completing large sections of the third water tunnel, big ideas to improve mass transit, securing mayoral control over the schools, which is something that held every mayor's attention, but they were unable to convert on it for years. Absolutely.
Jeannie, in the first sentence of Giuliani's political bio, it'll be 9/11 mayor, right? America's mayor, whatever. What do you think his, Bloomberg's first line going to be?
I think it has to do with his work in public health. I really do. I think that has been in the environment. I think for somebody who has changed the city,
he did win the war against smoking.
He won the war against smoking against a lot of people who said we should have the freedom to do what we want. And here was a guy who people look back and say, yeah, he was right about that. People laugh about the nanny state and those kinds of things. But there was a guy with a commitment, and he followed through on that. So I think public health and the environment, he's done an awful lot to change the city in so many ways.
For as much as Mayor Giuliani is beloved in some circles, there's a long line of people who don't remember the years well. But Bloomberg, while people didn't like some of the overreach with the nanny state and they thought that he was, above it all at times stylistically, you don't find that many people who hated him or carry that kind of antipathy to him. But stop and frisk is part of it, and the have and have-nots grew wider. Whether it's fair or not, it was on his watch too.
It was, but before we get to stop and frisk, you have to remember how polarized the city was coming out of Giuliani. So Dinkins, he would not meet with black elected officials. Notice I said elected officials. So Dinkins immediately becomes a mayor again. Bloomberg calls him up, invites him to City Hall. That went a long way bringing the city together. Stop and frisk, though, was a major black eye on his record.
It'll be fascinating what the next act of Michael Bloomberg will be, because we certainly have not heard the end of him. Evan, Jeannie, Dominic, thank you guys very much. Now, when we come back, we will turn to Sandy 1 year later. Tomorrow marks the 1 year since the storm here struck and forever changed the East Coast. Well, tonight, take a look back at that day and the year of rebuilding that followed. Please stay with us.